Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for signing in today. My name is Catherine McCourt. I'm the Director of Communications at the Centre for Coastal Studies, and I'd like to welcome you to our live Dockside chat. Today, we're sharing new research into the movements of white sharks off a grey seal haul out at High Head in Truro, Massachusetts. That's just outside Provincetown here. So joining Rich Delaney today is Lisa Sette, who's a biologist and manager of seal research at CCS. Hey, Lisa. And Bryan Legare, a seascape ecologist and doctoral intern in the Centre for Coastal Studies Seafloor Mapping program. Hey, Bryan. And hi, Rich, as well. Thank you. Lisa's been monitoring grey seal seasonal haulouts in southeastern Massachusetts for more than a decade now. She's also a founding member of the North Atlantic Seal Research Consortium. Bryan is a PhD student at UMass Amherst. His current research examines the relationship between white shark movement patterns and nearshore white shark habitat, which is what we'll be talking about today. So before I hand over to Rich, I just want to remind you again, we are taking questions throughout this presentation. So just hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen there, and that will come straight through to me. And then we'll pass those on to the panelists. And also want to remind you that our focus today is on seal and shark biology, so we won't be tackling any of those management issues that we know will probably arise at some point very soon. Some of you sent in questions already, so thanks for those. We'll answer as many as we can online, but we can also follow up with you offline, so if you want to drop us an email, that would be great. It's ccs@coastalstudies.org, and then we'll pass those on to Bryan and Lisa and Rich. So right now, I'll hand you over to our President and CEO, Rich Delaney, and enjoy. Thanks again.
Great. Well, thank you, Catherine, for getting us organized and launched here, and thank all of our visitors and friends for joining today. We did sell out the house. The full capacity of this this Zoom room is being used, so that's terrific. And I just want to again welcome yet another version of Dockside chats. I was just thinking about this. We started these back in March when we all retreated into our remote locations to survive the COVID. And here it is already, the middle of July. A lot of new people have arrived on Cape Cod. We also have some other friends arriving, sharks and seals. And so the topic today is great. Lots of new visitors, all learning how to interact and respect each other's place in the ecosystem. And for those of you who are just arriving and learning about the Center for Coastal Studies for the first time, let me just tell you a quick little bio. We are an independent research, education, and outreach organization. We have been in existence for 45 years now, and our mission really is to use the kind of expertise that you will hear from Bryan and Lisa in a minute to learn more about our Cape Cod and nearby ocean ecosystems and coastal environments, and then make that understanding available to basically everybody, decision makers, everyday people, all of us who have a way of influencing the way we live in relationship to the ocean, because ultimately what we need to do is all become better stewards of the coasts and oceans. And the more we know about it and understand, the more effective we will be as stewards. So I think this topic this afternoon will be a perfect discussion on, or a perfect way to illustrate how, as we learn more about ongoing issues with sharks, seals, and their habitat and their science, we can be better managers and better stewards. So that's the quick introduction. I'll tell you more at the end about how to become a member and how to help us support this research. But right now, I'm anxious to hear from Lisa and Bryan. We're fortunate to drag them in from the field. They're always out, who wouldn't want to be out doing research, but we've got them here today. So Lisa, I think you're going to start us off with a little presentation. Please do.
Thanks so much, Rich. And again, thanks so much for having us here today, Catherine and Rich. And we really appreciate this opportunity. So, that looking good? Yes, great. So before I get started, again, thank you to CCS. And I want to send out a special thank you to the Northwest Seal Research Consortium. Without all of the steering committee and the community of the SEAL Consortium, this work wouldn't have gotten done. And they provide so much research support, moral support, and continue to challenge me in keeping up with current literature and issues around seals. So thanks so much. So before I get underway with talking about specifically the haul out at High Head of the Meadow, I think it's important to lay, the basic foundation, which is the seals that we see today, the gray seals that we see today and harbor seals, were bountied by government and town sanctioned bounties throughout Maine and Massachusetts. And this was happening from the late 1800s all the way to the early 1960s. So seals were essentially extirpated from our waters off of southeastern Massachusetts. And over the last 55 years since the cessation of the bounties, seals have repopulated our area off of Cape Cod. But it's really important to remember that gray seals, when we talk about gray seals at High Head of the Meadow, they're part of a Northwest Atlantic population. And we owe this, we know this because of the work that Dr. Stephanie Woods from UMass Boston did for her graduate thesis. And essentially she looked at genetic samples from Canada and from samples off of Maine and Massachusetts. And there's very little difference. They're essentially all one population. And although seals were extirpated from southeastern Massachusetts waters, we experienced immigration from Canada, specifically areas like Sable Island in Canada. So when we talk about populations off the Cape today, we're talking about populations that some of which individual seals, some of which may breed here, but some may breed in Canada. Some may forage here, but some may forage in Canada as well. So it's a very fluid, dynamic population. So for High Head of the Meadow, I was away for several years in Alaska, and I returned in 2007. That's when I returned to the Center for Coastal Studies. And in the fall of 2007, we started to see quite a few individual seals bottling. That's when they sit in the water with their heads up, resting, occasionally coming on shore, but a few individuals here and there between High Head and Head of the Meadow. But in 2008, an actual haul out set up on a J-bar just off the beach. And a J-bar, just a really quick description, is a tidal sandbar that forms typically every late winter and spring, and provides a perfect kind of like cradle for the seals to haul out onto. And these J-bars and tidal sandbars provide great viewing opportunities for a biologist that wants to monitor seals on the shore. And they tend to migrate north and south depending on the year. This year, they're a little bit closer to High Head than Head of the Meadow Beach. And actually, sometimes they even will shift and move off those bars and go to a bar that sets up off of Race Point. This is an image that was taken by Elizabeth Bradfield on July 12th of this year from the Dolphin Fleet. And just to get at the dynamic nature of the population of seals that utilize the waters here, in 2015, we saw a very similar thing happen in Provincetown, where we had a few individuals bottling off the beach. And then by 2017, we had a pretty consistent herd that was occupying the waters there. Now, what's unique about this group is that they don't haul out on land all that often. They typically sit in very shallow water of about 3 meters or less, but it still allows us to monitor them and actually capture IDs and entanglements and other things. But I wanted to share this drone image with you. Dr. Michael Moore was just here this past week and actually flew over the haul out in Provincetown to look for entanglements. And what was really surprising, and I know this image is a little abstract, but what was really surprising is that we were able to count the heads of the seals that were above the water, but all these shadows that you see below the surface are gray seals laying on the bottom. And again, this is like 3 feet or less, 1 meter or less of water. So 14 individuals in this image have their head above the water. A minimum of 31 individuals are laying on the bottom, and we have a total of 45 in this image. So it really, it's got us thinking. So it's really interesting to think about how we define a haul out, right? Which that's another topic for another talk, but it was really amazing to see this. So when we talk about monitoring a haul out, what we basically do is we get to an area, we document the haul out in its entirety and try and get an estimate of the minimum number of animals present. We try and single out individuals that have unique pelage, and pelage is the hair on the body of the seal. Females, this is a female gray seal. Females are typically easier to identify because the males are very, very dark and oftentimes lack really distinctive markings unless they have a scar a little bit older. But this is an animal we know is dragon that has a very distinctive mark on her right head. So we can catalog these individuals to track individuals over time and space. Another thing that we look for are brands. Canada, Department of Fisheries and Oceans has been branding seals intermittently over time since the late 60s. This is a seal, J92, that CCS first observed in 2009. We share this data with the Department of Fisheries and Ocean, and they got back to us and basically said, oh, J92, this is a seal that was born in 2001 and as a pup was branded. We first saw it in 2009, but in the winter of 2009, 2010, it bred on Sable Island. And this again ties into the work of Stephanie Woods at UMass Boston, also Valerie Rao, who a lot of us built our work on, who did some of the first photo ID work at Muskeget in South Monomoy, where she saw the first seals that were immigrating in from Canada. So we'll look for branded individuals on the haul outs. We also look for any kind of wounds or health issues. This is an animal with alopecia. We don't know what causes alopecia in gray seals, but it's probably, we think it may be related to some kind of disease stress, nutritional stress, or even psychological stress in the animal. We were able to publish on data that CCS collected and we provided to Katie Pogliaris Bonner. And of over 10,000 stranding records and photo documents and photo images, we were able to keep over 2,000 pieces of data, and of that 7% showed signs of alopecia. And over time, between 2004 and 2013, it seems like it's increasing. So this is something we want to keep tracking. And just to make this clear, we don't deal with alopecia at the center, but CCS works with other stranding organizations around New England and beyond to provide this data too. We also monitor for entanglements. And again, this is something that's not only happening at Head of the Meadow, but across New England. And we were able to publish from some unmanned aerial flights from drones a couple of years ago, and Head of the Meadow was included in that data set. We were able to get 3 flights in with the support of the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, and we detected in those 3 flights a little over 1% of the entire haul out showed signs of entanglement. And we also monitor for unusual wounds like shark interactions. And when we're looking for shark interactions, we see things very minor like this, where you see healing wounds or scars. And we do see it in harbor seals as well. And sometimes they're more severe, and other times they're fatal. But something that's come out of that is observations of predation on carcasses. So if you think about it, sometimes sharks are successful at getting a seal. Sometimes they die at sea, sometimes they die at land. In both cases, they're part of the nutrient cycle, which is fascinating. And on land, we see things like a coyote, which could easily open up a seal carcass, or if it's a wounded animal, kill it. Also, we know that blackback gulls have the strength to actually open up a seal carcass. And one observation we made actually at Head of the Meadow is we had this really large gray seal bull that died, and over a period of a couple of months, the carcass just shrank because of scavengers coming in and out of the area, taking advantage of it. But really late in August one year, I saw a flock of semi-palmated plovers, which is this individual bird here, come in, and they were actually eating the insects that were colonizing the pelage and fat that were left over on the beach, which is just a great way to show like the ecosystem services of seals in death as well, which is something to think about. And it's important to remember that seals are predators too. We just finished up a project recently with a graduate student, Dr. Keith Hernandez at Louisiana State University. He's finishing up writing his thesis. And CCS collected samples and did the hard part analysis, and then Keith did the prey DNA work. And I don't want to reveal the results yet. Hopefully we'll be publishing that soon. But basically, gray seals are generalists. They'll take advantage of what's seasonally available in the area. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the results of Keith's work. When doing that work, we also collected scats and went through the scats at the CCS lab, and we actually opportunistically found plastics. And I just want to give a shout out to my colleague at CCS, Christy Hudak. I happen to have in my lab my neighbor who is actually well versed in FTR work, which is a machine that allows researchers to look at what a particular microdebris is. And what she found is that we had resins, cellophane, and also a type of rubber that's really common in roofing and O-rings and marine rubber pieces. So from our diet work, we were able to even identify that there were plastics most likely in the prey that the seals were consuming. So that's the first time that's been published in the Northwest Atlantic. So we were really excited about that. And beyond the haulouts, we have a new project that's in development in conjunction with Bryan and also University of Massachusetts with Stephanie Wood. And we're beginning a proof of concept study to look at how seals transit on the backside, on the ocean side of the Cape. And we'll be looking at their behavior and also group size, but also how that relates to shark behavior. And with that, I'll pass it off to Bryan.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Bryan Legare. I'm a biologist in the Seafloor Mapping program at the Center for Coastal Studies. And today I'm going to talk to you about a project I started as part of my PhD work at Head of the Meadow, looking at fine scale shark behavior at several beaches along the backside of Cape Cod. Can we see the presentation fine? Perfect. So I'm going to jump right into it. One thing I like is following Lisa because she does a great introduction about the seals along Cape Cod. And you often can't talk about the white sharks in shallow water if you're not talking about seals and the ecosystem. And what we've had is a rebound of both white sharks and gray seals along the shores of Cape Cod, which has resulted in overlap of both human and shark areas. And over the last decade, we've had increased human-shark interactions and increased behavior of both humans and sharks where they overlap. And because of that, we want to understand how these sharks are using shallow water along Cape Cod, and then allow the managers in the area to make the best recommendations on that. But what I'm going to talk about is what they're doing. So my research, the problem is that humans and sharks are using a similar habitat in nearshore Cape Cod, My objective is to look at the biotic and abiotic influences on their movements to better inform both science and managers. And what I'm using primarily as a tool is fine scale acoustic telemetry. All this work that I'm doing is in direct collaboration with the Greg Scoble at the Division of Marine Fisheries and Megan Witten at the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. And we're working also closely with the USGS and the Cape Cod National Seashore, allowing us to really get close and understand what's going on. So all the sharks that I will be talking about today were tagged by the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy and the Division of Marine Fisheries. So last fall, we were able to start a pilot proof of concept to do some fine scale movement at Head of the Meadow, between Head of the Meadow and High Head, the area in which Lisa was describing, the seal hollow that started in around 2008. This is a popular beach for tourists, and it allows us access to this area being relatively close to Provincetown. And we deployed this last September. The study design is to take these acoustic receivers, which record the presence of the tagged sharks. And we put these in a very dense array, allowing us to triangulate their position as they move through the study site. So in doing that, allows us to really get some fine scale movement, where the traditional work that DMF and the White Shark Conservancy has done was more broad scale, where the receivers were placed kilometers and miles apart, where these receivers are placed about 200 to 300 meters apart, a much more dense area. And one major thing that we decided to do for both interactions with humans and interactions with other swimming animals is we decided to go as ropeless as possible, using a timed release with a little burn wire that, at a set date and time, these receivers will pop up to the surface, allowing us to collect them, but not having rope in the water column for 70, 80 days is something that we try to do to reduce entanglement in whales and seals and turtles and other creatures. In addition to all the receivers and tracking equipment, we deployed a bunch of oceanographic instruments, including an ADCP to measure tides, waves, and currents. We're looking at turbidity to see if the presence of white sharks is potentially related to how turbid the water is. Because if we're to use drones and other visual surveys, we need to understand how the ability to see the sharks is possible. Looking at temperature and conductivity and other influences. On top of that, we, being in the seafloor mapping program, we used our high resolution side scan sonar to collect habitat information in form of side scan. And we also collect bathymetry with that, allowing us to track the sharks and triangulate the positions across the troughs and the bars, which are direct features that surfers and other individuals use to recreate off these areas. So last September, we deployed for about 3 weeks, and this is a very busy slide of ADCP data. Up top is water speed, and down below is water direction. And it's pretty straightforward. On a normal day, you have water going north, you have water going south, north, south, north, south, until you get something like a nor'easter, which we had at the end of the deployment period, in which the water was screaming pretty fast in terms of wave standards. And also the water structure instead of going north-south, was coming more onshore in more of a rip current type scenario, changing the nearshore dynamics of nearshore energy dynamics in this area. And what happens is we can take that, all the data that we collected, and first off, we just generally look at presence. And during those 3 weeks in time, we had 31 individual different tagged white sharks visit Head of the Meadow. They were present in this area, which is between 1 and 10 meters deep, 40% of the time, which you can see in the graph to the left. In the graph to the right, you can see their presence, which is the red dash, overlaid with wave height, which is the black line. And you can see that the sharks were actually present early on during some pretty stormy activity. But it wasn't towards the end where, you know, the wave heights got high and we had those rip current scenarios in which the sharks vacated the area. One thought is that during these periods of time, it's too much like our washing machine and it's too hard to swim against those areas. So they're gonna go just slightly offshore or away from nearshore areas because it's too dangerous for a large bodied animal to be swimming in that type of area. We mapped the area. We got extremely, high resolution bathymetry. You can see the outer bar, the inner bar, and then these nearshore J-bars and troughs that Lisa was referencing earlier. The seal hollow is in generally this area in the northern part of the array. And what we're able to do is triangulate 1,928 positions of 21 of the 30 sharks that traveled through the area and start to do statistics on that, doing just a density of the points within the array. We had a higher density of points near the seal hollow, and as you get away from the seal hollow, there was a lesser density of points. Nice general summary of that. And if we look at the distribution of the points over the bathymetry, you can see that the peak distribution is falling right on the outside of that inner bar. So they seem to be cruising up and down the inner bar here and hanging out in front of the seals. And if I measure each point from the seal hollow, we can graph that in a histogram, and it shows you that you are more likely to have a measured shark position closer to the seal hollow than not. So this really emphasizes the point that you don't swim near seals. That the sharks are moving up and down the coast, and they tend to spend a little bit more time near the seal hollow than not. And with the movement data and the positions, we're able to track them and see how they're either making long jaunts across the habitat, or if they're making these very tortuous movements in more of a search pattern like the shark is doing right there, which seems to occur more often near where the seal hollow is, up near these J-bars, than down closer to the swimming beach where the seals aren't as dense. So that was the pilot program from last year. And this year we are continuing the work at Head of the Meadow, expanding a little bit north to include more of the area at High Head. And we also are deploying an array down at Nauset Beach, between the swimming beach and just north of Callahan's Pass, as this is an area that historically has a lot of shark activity and predations and a different type of benthic bathymetry where the sharks would be moving in and out. And we deployed these a couple weeks ago at both Nauset and Head of the Meadow. On Saturday, we finally had a non-windy day in which I could get out at the beach, and we deployed some more equipment at Nauset Beach and was able to map. And we maintained a few of the receivers, and we've already had at least 20 sharks visit Head of the Meadow over the last 22 days, and at least 9 sharks visit Nauset Beach over the last, over 16 days of deployment. So the sharks are here, the sharks are moving through, and hopefully we can get another repeat of the quality of the data that we collected last fall, so we can start answering some of these questions. So that is the work that I am conducting here at the center, looking at the fine scale movement of white sharks. And I'm ready for some questions if anyone's got them.
Thanks, Bryan and Lisa, that was awesome. I do happen to have a few questions already, but I do encourage anyone who's listening in today to ask as well. Just use that Q&A button on your screen there. So bear with me. The first question we have is from John from Washington, D.C. After a great white makes a successful kill, does it stop feeding for a period of time? Are they really eating machines that will never be full enough to stop feeding?
Well, like I was discussing with Lisa yesterday, everything's an eating machine. A hummingbird's an eating machine. Everything requires, a consistent diet of food while they're based on their metabolism. So there are periods of time after they have a large meal where they can probably go weeks without feeding, but I wouldn't use necessarily the term eating machine unless you put it in a broader category of like even, hummingbirds are eating machines.
All right, thanks, Bryan. Richard in Eastham, how are current seal shark population numbers compared to historical numbers? So pre-European numbers.
Would you like me to go first, Bryan? So that's a great question. And we don't have good records, historical records from that time, but a really good paper came out from University of Maine, Orono. Dr. Christina came in and she looked at ancient DNA from indigenous people's middens. And just for folks that don't know what a midden is like a garbage heap. So she was able to acquire ancient DNA from middens in New England. And this would be from gray seals that were in the system pre-bounties. So when the data that she came up with, what it suggests is that pre-bounty populations were more genetically diverse, and therefore most likely more robust, so greater numbers. And it also suggests that it might mean that this population could basically increase in size and continue to expand.
And for the sharks, Curtis et al. Had a paper a few years ago looking at the historic catch and occurrence of white sharks throughout the Northwest Atlantic. And they had come down to probably a historical low in the 80s, 90s in the area, and then started slowly inching their way back after protection and ceasing of fishing and incidental catch of them over the past 2 decades. So they're coming back up from a low, but we don't have necessarily hard numbers for historic population.
Thank you. Next up, here's a good one. Is there a point at which the concentration of seals in one haul-out area, and I think about Chatham, Monomoy, North Beach, the Pleasant Bay area, so that's down on the outer Cape here, Is there a point where that might result in a natural capping of the population due to competition, parasites, predation, depletion, etc.?
That's another great question. But I do think it's important to, again, zoom out. Chatham, Monomoy, Pleasant Bay, they have seasonal haulouts within Pleasant Bay, Chatham, and on South Monomoy. And at South Monomoy, you do have a winter presence because South Monomoy is one of the larger pupping and breeding colonies in Massachusetts. But it's important to remember the seasonal haulouts and the presence of seals in the summer. Although we can recognize individuals within the population that use that area, the seals are highly mobile species, and we actually have pretty good data from a tagging effort that happened that was organized by NASRC, or the Northwest Atlantic Seal Research Consortium, back in 2013, and that data suggests that these seals are moving in and out of that area, like Pleasant Bay and Chatham, and most likely foraging off Nantucket Shoals or off Provincetown or off Head of the Meadow. So they're a highly mobile species, and there's a lot of movement. So it's also important to look at the ecosystem as a whole, and basically the ecosystem will cap the population. The ecosystem basically determines the capacity for the population of seals or fishes or whales or sea turtles, right? Because it's basically providing the habitat and the prey. So if you look at it from an ecosystem point of view, that's the ecosystem determines that. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Thanks, Lisa. I'm kind of following up on that from David in East Falmouth. Why haven't gray seals and sharks moved into Nantucket Sound, but they're found in Cape Cod Bay?
They are there a little bit. They're not there as much as, you know, on the backside of the Cape or in Cape Cod Bay. It's probably due to prey presence and topography. If the food was there, they'd probably be there. And also Nantucket Sound gets a bit warmer than some of the other areas, which might push the sharks to their optimal temperature, which is probably between about 55 and 70, 75 degrees. So if it's above 70, which Nantucket Sound gets more often than the backside of the Cape, they might not be there as much.
So the seal part of that question, seals are present in Nantucket Sound in the summer and fall. And in fact, they're present in Nantucket Sound year round. When we flew aerial surveys with the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, it was on every survey in the summer, we saw seals at Tuckernuck Island and also Muskeget Shoals. And at the time, a little bit of the Waukee Shoals were still there, but they kind of come and go. It's a very dynamic, Nantucket Sound is very dynamic, sands always changing, just like it is on the backside of the Cape. But there are seals present there along also the western edge of South Monomoy. So seals are in the area, and local stranding organizations have seen seals that exhibit wounds consistent with shark interactions. So they're probably there, but maybe not in great numbers. But I would actually defer to like Greg Scomo. Brian, are there buoys, listening buoys in Nantucket Sound, do you know?
There's a few of them, and it's just not one of the hot spots. I wouldn't say they're not there. It's just not, they're not there like they're on the backside off of Nauset or Head of the Meadow.
All right. Cool.
Catherine, you mute.
There we go, that's better. Just another quick question for Brian to clarify that the shark numbers that you quoted are based on the actual tagged sharks.
Correct. Yeah, they are tagged sharks through DMF and Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. There's just over 200, I believe, that are still actively pinging. And part of Megan Witten's dissertation is creating a population number based off of their surveys. So I don't know how many there are out there yet, and I know she's working on those numbers.
Okay, great, thank you. And finally, sometimes on Sharktivity, I see great whites coming into Cape Cod Bay. Is this surprising to you?
Nope.
Nope.
Nope. There's no, to me, as a biologist, there's no real reason why they're not in Cape Cod Bay, using that as a different, habitat, especially the smaller ones, which are more piscivores and eat a wider variety of animals. That's what they generally see within Cape Cod Bay, but the large ones go in there too, so.
Great, thank you. So did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's important. And we also have good historical records from local fishers and scientific literature that supports that white sharks were present in Cape Cod Bay historically as well.
Great. And one last question here for Bryan. Can you say more about the listening buoys? Are they everywhere that researchers would like them? If not, where are they lacking?
They are not the cheapest things in the world, so they aren't everywhere where we'd like them. The primary goal for Greg Scomel's work is focusing on more of the swimming and recreational beaches and areas in which, people are, him coming from a management agency. We would like them everywhere, basically. So it's hard to say where they're not. I can more say just where they are, which is every couple of kilometers on the backside, some throughout the Cape Cod Bay, but also the same technology is being used from Nova Scotia all the way down to Florida. So different researchers studying sea bass and flounder and other stuff also get detections, and a part of a data sharing network, we can get those detections. But we always want more receivers.
And what should someone do if they happen to come across one of your receivers on the beach or else?
Call us.
Okay.
Yep.
508-487-3622. All right, well, thank you both so much. I'm going to head over to Rich now. Rich, you want to say a few words before we wrap up? Oh, you're on mute, Rich.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Lisa. I do have one question for our panelists. I'm just thinking, looking and listening to your really exciting projects and applications of science. I remember my days sitting in a classroom, although today our young students who might be watching are probably sitting at home, pouring through a biology book or a chemistry book. But what you guys are showing is science in application, science in the real, really exciting stuff. Do you have any words of encouragement or advice for young people who may be watching the show to say, here's how you should get to where you guys are today?
It's more persistence than anything else. I grew up in New Hampshire, got my master's in the islands, did oyster work in Texas to eventually end up doing white shark work off of Cape Cod. So it's more persistence in pushing forward and trying to build up a unique skill set.
Great. Lisa?
Yeah, I think don't underestimate practical experience and relationships with other kinds of biologists. Take your math courses, take your biology courses, take your writing courses, have a really good background in writing, math, and science, but also just get out and look. Looking and learning an area is really important, and engaging with people who are working in the field. come visit us, come email us. If you're interested in sharks or seals or whatever you happen to be interested in, keep engaged.
Great. Thank you both. And again, your science illustrates really one of the major principles of the Center for Coastal Studies, which is we don't examine issues just from one singular perspective as a biologist might, or just a geologist. We really work to be ecosystem based, to have an integrated look at the ocean and the issues around the coast. That way we get a much fuller understanding. And your discussions about sharks and seals and how they interrelate, not only with each other, but with the bathymetry and the ocean current, the whole picture is so important. And then both of your research projects illustrate the other basic principle of the Center for Coastal Studies is we like to say we do, quote, science that matters, science that helps people understand what's going on out there and how to provide solutions to issues, management issues, good sustainable solutions to management issues. Unlike the solution that our forefathers and mothers provided for what they thought was misceived overpopulation of seals, and the management response was a bounty. No, that's not what we need to do. We need to have a way to find a balance. So please, all of you who are listening today, follow us more. We have a website that's www.coastalstudies.org. Catherine has a really active Facebook and other social media avenues for you to follow us every day. You can learn about the 30-something other of Lisa and Bryan's colleagues who are doing equally interesting research in all other aspects of the ocean. And then most importantly, from my perspectives, I'd like to invite you to become members, because even though we have 35 or 40 wonderful scientists working really hard, we need an army of people to be interested in the oceans, to become ocean stewards by learning more. And you can do that by not only learning about the center, but becoming a member. We'd love to have lots of members, and we'd like to have members support us financially if you can, in every other which way. So again, at that same website, you can learn how to help support the great work that you've just seen illustrated by both Lisa and Bryan. So thanks again for your interest today. Enjoy the summer. Stay safe, social distancing and all, but get out and enjoy the ocean. Get out and enjoy the beautiful Cape Cod that we all are blessed to be part of. And then stay tuned for another Dockside chat coming up in a short time. Thank you all for joining. Goodbye.